Welcome to your property podcast with me, Ant.
And me, Alex.
And today we're talking through what we would do if we were starting out in property today. So I've been a landlord and property investor for nearly 20 years, maybe over 20 years now. And although Alex is quite a lot younger than me, he's been doing this a while as well. So Alex, we're going to try and share some thoughts today on how to get started in property, or maybe how to get restarted in property if people have kind of maybe become a kind of accidental landlord. They've got one property or maybe two, but just wondering what to do next. And we see a lot of people who kind of get stuck at this stage, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. The first of all, people who are listening to this and watching this, and people who are reading the articles based on this, you're often going to come into two camps. Well, first of all, you're obviously interested in property, which is great, and we love that. But some of the members are going to be experienced looking to maybe restart and scale, but actually there's a good chunk of people who are looking to use this as a resource to get started. That it can be easy for us as active investors to always be forward thinking, and sometimes it's really key for us to look back. We have dozens and hundreds of conversations, and I was saying this before this, that one of the biggest things before we even get into strategy, which is probably why everyone is here, everyone wants to hear about the strategy, and we'll definitely dive into that. But one of the real regular things that I see and I hear is this paralysis by analysis of property is such a massive world, and we're also talking about big chunks of money, and I think that can be very, very scary for a lot of people, and rightly so. I think that everyone kind of recognizes that your first investment is a super key one to get right. You know, you get it wrong and you tie a lot of money in that for a long time, and you really slow down your process. One of the things that I get a lot of from emails and communications and calls is definitely people who have been researching, and I use the word researching a little loosely because actually sometimes it's just sitting on their ass really for a long time, and I'm sure that's probably resonating with a lot of people who are listening and watching, where they'll research one strategy, they'll research another strategy, they'll research this, they'll do this, and shiny penny syndrome. There's no execution. There's no execution because this sounds great, but then this sounds fantastic, and then this sounds even better, and this sounds just as good. But why do this when you can do this? So perhaps we can shed some light on what we would do and help people narrow down, and hopefully help people execute. Because at the end of the day, you can't sit there in this learning stage forever.
And we were talking the other day about that. Let's say it's the first property deal, your first property deal, or it might be a second or third, but the first with intent, shall we call it? The first one where you're saying, you know what, this is what I'm doing now. And that first purchase, that first investment has to take you closer to your end goal, towards whatever it is you're working towards. And for most of us, that's kind of financial freedom, long-term financial security. Maybe we're looking to grow our net worth in terms of equity and properties, probably looking to grow our cash flow at the same time. And whatever that property deal is, number one starts with, it has to take you closer towards your end goal. And we don't always see people do that, do we? We see them maybe doing the wrong type of deal, or maybe even worse, doing no deal sometimes, and just kind of sitting there waiting for the perfect deal. And probably the perfect deal doesn't really exist. Would you agree?
Absolutely. There's it needs to, once you start taking this property business seriously, and don't get me wrong, I was talking to a friend literally yesterday, an old friend that I used to work with, a guy called Cam, and we were talking about his property strategy, and he's doing really well. He's got 10 properties or so, but he's never refurbished any of them. He's buying them, turnkey, and that's because he's got a lot of seed money coming into that. Actually, he's now looking at saying, I want to go full-time property, but I know that this strategy isn't the best thing to do, that there's better strategies, but he's been working, really long hours and whatnot, and I was describing what he was doing as a battering ram, and I was saying that you're going up to the gates and you're just a battering ram. You've got this, because it's all from seed money. Now it's time to be strategic. It's time to be a sniper and be precise and actually get strategic with your decisions. So he's having what is going to be this rebirth of his property company, when he's now actually going to be taking this seriously, which sounds really funny when you get to a certain position and then you start to take it seriously. But actually, he was finding that it was working, but they weren't as strategic, and they weren't moving immediately in the direction that he wanted to. And yeah, so even you're changing it at 10 properties with a really good portfolio. But yes, the second point of that is that yeah, you can sit there for ages and not execute because it goes round and round and round in circles, which is an equally tough position to be in because and there's so much information out there and granted, you know, you've got YPN, but actually if we're saying something different to a YouTube video and then there's a TikTok telling you this stuff, it can be very, very hard. It can be very, very hard. And yeah, I'm not envious of that kind of data dump position that you're in. But I'm sure we can help for sure.
Okay, so let's talk about, you've got some golden rules for investing. You've written about them in the magazine and online quite a few times. So maybe they're a good place to start. So talk us through those. So what are you looking to achieve from any or your next property deal?
Absolutely. And look, my kind of investment philosophy comes from what I'm looking to get out of it, and equally that's going to change based on other people. And we have to, when kind of building your own investment philosophy, you have to work out what your situation is. If you really need cash flow really early, then maybe doing certain strategies isn't the best. If you are low on funds, then you know there's no point looking at HMO conversions unless you can, unless straight away you're going to be getting investor finance. For me, it breaks down. I always need to be able to, and we spoke about this last time. I always need to be able to add value to a property. That's first. First and foremost, I need to be able to add value because I want to be able to get my money in the back end. I need to have good cash flow, and realistically, for me, that looks minimum 350, ideally 400 plus pounds per month, because I want to give myself enough cover that if something happens, I don't have that exposure to. I'm obviously looking at the fundamentals of an area as well and saying that I think this is a solid area, and I don't think this is going to be a sleepy ghost town in the next in the next 3 years. We're all in the position with houses. And granted, they're going to be older people who are investing, but if you're in your 60s, you're still looking at properties in the long term. If you're in your 30s, you're still looking at property in the long term. You need to. I'm not trying to buy something that I'm thinking I'm going to have to sell this in a few years' time. So I want to look at the long-term fundamentals of the area, and then so cash flow and raising finance are very much at the top of my priority list. Now, over the years, I've kind of gone into HMOs, and I still hold 2 HMOs. I've gone down single let route and kind of the buy, refurbish, refinance, which I think we'll talk about for sure. Both work really well, and both I think are very good to hold. To hold part of your portfolio. Since we've last spoken, I've handed over both my HMOs to management. And so that's a little bit of an easier life. But yes, I have this criteria, these principles that I invest by, and I encourage all people who are looking to get into investing to sit down and say, okay, so actually what are my end goals, and thus what does this vehicle need to look like to get me there? Does it need, if your end goal is here, there's no point having tiny little wheels if that's not going to help. If you don't have the time to invest, then perhaps it looks very different to something I can be a bit more hands-on and actually, or maybe I've got a I've got a trade-based background. Should I be looking at flips? And if you're looking at flips, okay, what does that criteria look like? At minimum, what does it take to get Ant, who's a bit of a DIY aficionado, or Ant, who's a builder? What does it take to get Ant out of bed? Is that 30k? Is that 40k? Is that 50k? Be very specific, because there's no point if there's no point in you getting out of bed for a 20k flip because your time is better spent elsewhere, then don't do it. And that can be very hard because then you get emotionally attached to properties. You go around, it looks really good, and then you look at the numbers and maybe they don't meet your criteria. You have to learn how to say no.
Yeah, we talked about this before, didn't we? About getting emotionally attached to a property and kind of kidding ourselves that the numbers might work, being really optimistic about them. So as part of this process, I guess we get ruthless with the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
We can't be overly pessimistic about the end values or the rents, but equally we can't be overly optimistic. We have to be realistic about what this thing's going to deliver. If we're too cautious, we're never going to do a deal. We're never going to move forward because we'll see the problems in every single project that we look at. So it's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it, between getting getting comfortable with that deal.
For sure. When we spoke last time, you spoke about how right at the start you were kind of you were buying properties and not necessarily having anything too strict in terms of criteria. Do you remember what your kind of criteria was when you started to build one and you started to say, okay, well this business can be done better? Do you remember what that looked like? I'm curious to hear if that's and kind of how that's evolved now.
Yeah, so way back then, I probably would have bought almost any property, no money down or no money left in. No money down was very, very doable, very, very possible back then. So I wasn't really looking at the kind of cash flow side of things. I wasn't really looking at the kind of fundamentals of the area, what's going to happen to this property, what's going to happen to this area over a period of time, who's my tenant going to be, are they going to be long term, are they going to be stable? I was just kind of acquiring because I could. And that
It's a Wild West
changed.
land grab.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And you know what? Back then, people were buying 50, 100 properties in a year, which sounds insane, but it was happening. And for me, that changed with the back of the credit crunch because lending criteria got a lot stricter. Lenders were looking a lot more closely at the quality of the deals, the underlying deal, stress testing it in terms of the rental coverage on the mortgage. And that made me follow those same rules. So that then switched to saying, okay, I want to leave as little money in this deal as I can. I want to uplift the value because we couldn't just refinance against the market value then. We had to force the appreciation of the asset. We had to add value to the property in some way. And then once we've done that and we're looking to refinance, we had to have 25, 30, 35% rental coverage over and above what our mortgage payment was going to be. And that actually became for me, well, do you know what? I want my mortgage payment to be no more than half and ideally no more than a third of what the rent I'm getting in is going to be. So those became my criteria. I want to buy this thing. I want to add value to it. I want to be able to recycle my money, so get my money back out. And I want this thing robust because we didn't know what was happening with interest rates. Hey, when did we ever know what's happening with interest rates? But I wanted to make sure that if interest rates rose significantly, I'd be at the back of the queue in terms of handing keys back to the bank because my property was robust. I had a solid tenant in there. The rent coming in was strong and I could easily cover the mortgage. Those were that's what my criteria became. And I think they're great rules to live by now. And
Absolutely.
that then became about what are the properties that I can go shopping for, that I can go fishing for, that are easiest to add value to, are in strong tenant demand. I know I can fill that property in days. I know the tenant's going to stick around for a long time and it's going to be easy to manage. That became my kind of mantra for investing.
Absolutely. I just want to touch on one thing that you mentioned there that I think is an important quick thing to cover and just to run through people because it's possible people don't understand the term stress test because that stress test is a lending term. So let's say you're mortgaging a property. I'm going to use round numbers because I'm not very intelligent and big maths well it's a bit too much. So you might have £1,000 as your mortgage payment per month, and by mortgage payment usually going to mean interest only. Now I should caveat this: I'm not a mortgage broker. This is not my game, but this is kind of the explanation that they've always given, and so I kind of echoed that. So you might have £1,000. Now the lender is going to then stress test your property in terms of its performance against that. So what they'll often say is it needs to be 125%, sometimes 150% of your mortgage rate in order to give yourself a little bit of a buffer. So in that case, it could be 1.25k, it could be 1.5k as needed to come in, and that's the lender saying, "Yep, this is a viable property." So not all property is going to be viable, and if you're looking at a property that is going to be £1,000 a month, and you think you're only get a 1,100, and you're saying it's fine, I'll subsidise it myself. A lot of lenders won't let you do that these days. So yeah, I think that's an important thing because stress test is what, especially for buy-to-lets. Now you won't need to worry about stress tests when it comes to HMOs and other things like that potentially. But when it comes to buy-to-lets, which I know full well, the majority of people here, we know the mass majority of people here will be interested in buy-to-lets. It's going to make a lot of properties not work in it, and unfortunately for a lot of you, it's going to make a lot of properties that are just down the road from you because I'm sure you live in a relatively nice area, and often they're not great rental properties, and that's why a lot of people have to go further north and go to the kind of higher yielding, higher performing areas in order to meet stress tests, because the lenders have simply said, we don't want to have everyone returning the keys very quickly because it's not working with with tenants, and and so yeah, they implement these stress tests. So how does how you mentioned obviously how that criteria has kind of formed. If you look back now, and if you say, okay, I'm going to start back. I start back investing. You are you with with the kind of the knowledge you've got. What would you be doing now? And let's put some kind of some info to that, because everyone's position is going to be different. Let's say you've got a little bit of money. You've got maybe, and I don't want to put any. I don't want to be saying that 100k is only a little bit of money, because 100k is a ton of money. But let's say you've got somewhere between, your 60, 100k kind of region, which is an absolute ton of money, but relative to some of the you're not able to go out and build some monstrosity of a skyscraper. You are limited in what you can do with that. So what would you be doing? What would your play be?
So if I was brand new, just starting out or restarting now, I would start with a strategy that I got quite good at with my business partner, and that was from turning one-bedroom flats into two-bedroom flats. That was a great way, and is a great way, of adding value. So what that looks like in terms of a property is a lot of the properties where I invest, which are here in the southwest of the UK, are Victorian terrace properties. Used to be houses. Some of them have been converted into flats. Some of them I've converted into flats. But a lot of the ones that have been converted into flats have kind of large living rooms, and then separate kitchen, separate bedroom. So one of the things we got pretty good at was taking the kitchen out, moving the kitchen into the create an open plan living area. So the a kind of kitchen area that's in the lounge. So a large living room with a kitchen in it, kind of open plan living, and then what had been the kitchen becomes a second bedroom. And I'm normally coupling that with a property that's maybe a bit distressed, maybe a bit unloved, might be a repossession, might be someone who's got into difficulty, might be a probate case. Looking at it, it's putting off a lot of people who don't want to take on a refurb. And the reason I'm sort of coupling these two strategies is that actually simply buying and refurbishing a property to add enough value to refinance can be really challenging. There's a lot of people who are in that space and looking to do that. They're watching stuff like Homes Under the Hammer or whatever it might be, or they're, a friend of theirs has bought a flat and they're listening to them. And they just think, oh, do you know what? I could just buy this thing, tidy it up, lick a paint, new kitchen, new bathroom, maybe, and that will be enough. It's probably not enough to add value. So from my point of view, when I started doing these, I could buy flats for, and if you're listening to this and you're in the south east of UK, these numbers are not going to relate particularly, but maybe just add, double it or times it by four, whatever the number might be. So we could buy best flats for maybe 50, 60,000 pounds, something like that, and they probably would have been done up, done up as a one bedroom flat. They probably were worth about maybe 70, 75, there or thereabouts. But as a two bedroom flat, they've got more value because we do this weird thing in the UK. We actually value properties on the number of bedrooms, it seems to be, rather than the kind of floor space, which is perhaps more typical in the States or something like that. By buying that thing at, say, let's say 55, 60,000 pounds, and spending somewhere between 10 and 15,000 pounds on, bit of cosmetic refurb, bit of tidy up, and then putting in the kitchen into the living room. What had been the kitchen becomes a second bedroom. Actually, that flat's now worth 90, 95, maybe 100,000 pounds. Sometimes some of the ones we've done were worth 115, something like that. And so all of a sudden, I've done two things. I've forced the appreciation of the asset over and above the value as a one bed flat. So it makes it loads easier to recycle the deposit when I come to refinance. And I'm also forcing the rent that I'm getting. So instead of getting, let's say now it would be 700, £750 a month. Probably back then it might have been £500 a month because rents have gone crazy in virtually all areas. So instead of getting £750 a month, I'd be getting £950 a month because it's a two bedroom place. And I'm also presenting it so it's a finished product. It's ready to let. It looks really nice and new, brand new kitchen, new flooring throughout, new bathroom. it looks like a nice place. It's somewhere where someone wants to live. And when I compare it with the other properties that are in that are of a similar ilk, similar kind of property in the area, I could probably put my hand on my heart and say, well, mine's the best. Mine's the best in that price bracket. It's certainly not the Ritz-Carlton. It's certainly not a luxury mansion. But if you're looking at renting a two-bed flat in PL postcode, where I've got quite a few properties, then mine would be in the top 5% in terms of look and appeal. Maybe not the nicest area, but people genuinely want to live there. So for me, that's a good place to start. Don't need planning permission to do it as long as you've got the permission of the freeholder. It's even better if you're the freeholder. So what I would really do, ideally, is to actually buy blocks of these things. And sometimes that can be just two flats in one building. Sometimes it's four flats, sometimes it's six, whatever it might be. But I would be looking at, okay, I get some economies of scale if I buy more than one of these things at a time, because fewer people are competing in that space. Lots of people out shopping for one property, fewer people out shopping for four at a time, because there's a knowledge gap there. They don't know how to finance it necessarily. They don't know how to kind of structure the legal side of things. If we're title splitting, and I know we're getting a little bit more advanced now, but if we're creating separate leasehold flats within what is a freehold building, then we get some economies of scale of when we buy. And yeah, I still believe that's a great place to start. What about you, Alex? What would you be doing?
Ignore me for now. I've got questions on this. Ignore
Okay,
me
well,
for now.
go for it.
Let's put me. Okay. You've mentioned there obviously that you'd be doing this and make a decent amount of money on the renovation, refurb, and the kind of conversion. But you've also then mentioned that you would let them out. Why? What's your kind of thinking there? How does this feed into into kind of long-term goals as to why you'd let them out rather than just selling them straight away?
Well, we have sold some as well, and I think that's really important to note. At times, I've wanted to bring cash back in. One of the sort of great things about this is, particularly if you're doing a block, let's say you're doing four flats in one building, is you have options. Then you've got options of, I could keep all of these things. Maybe I can't refinance all of my money back out. What's that going to look like in terms of money left in there? Maybe I could sell one or two of these and then end up with much lower gearing on the two that I actually retain. So for me, if I'm keeping them, it's all about, right, I'm creating equity within each of these properties. And let's say it's 25% equity. Keep the numbers really, really straightforward. You're creating 25% equity in each unit, in each flat. Let's say the average value is £100,000. Well, each one of these things instantly increases my net worth by £25,000. So if I do a block of four, that's £100,000 uplift in equity in my net worth from one property deal. If it's two, and I've done I've done blocks with just two flats in, that's an uplift of £50,000. And how long does it take someone to save £50,000? Even if you're earning really, really good money, if you're in the top 1% of earners in the UK, which I think is probably around about £100,000 a year, how easy is it to save £50,000? Not very easy. We all know what happens as you earn a bit more money. Your kind of lifestyle increases a little bit, and you probably just spend a bit more as well. And also, we get taxed a lot these days, so there's not a huge amount of money left over. If you're earning a six-figure sum, you probably aren't able to put away £50,000 a year in savings. If you are, well done. Like, you're living pretty frugally. But I would say for most people, the opportunity to save 50 grand, it just doesn't happen. It's really,
Sure.
really challenging.
So what do you need to see in your business and slash in your kind of future opportunities for you to say, I need to sell these right at the end of that? What do you need to see, or if you made that decision right at the start, are you buying this to keep, or are you getting to the point of saying, oh, there's another opportunity here, that's why I'll sell?
Well, sometimes I've got other projects that are on, which are going to be more capital intensive, and sometimes I've got things that I want to do in my life outside of business that I want to pay for and take money and bring money in to pay for those things. So a few years ago, I was doing a deal, and the intention was to sell. The intention from the outset was to sell. I wasn't completely sure of the market in terms of selling. So I knew, because I'd done quite a few kind of 1-bed flats into 2 beds before. I knew what the economics looked like in terms of if I keep these things. So I was 95% sure, and that's probably as sure as we ever get in property, that come the end of this, if I'm struggling to sell these, then I can just refinance them, get a buy-to-let mortgage on each of the properties or one mortgage on the whole freehold, and get my money back out, and this thing will chug along with each individual flat making me probably £300 a month profit. So in a block of 4, 1,200 quid a month. So my intention was to sell. I wasn't completely confident in that market because I hadn't really sold many properties before. And let's be honest, if you're here in the UK, selling properties is a pain in the arse. It takes ages, buyers drop out, you never know it's going to happen until you actually exchange contracts. So intention number one on that deal was to sell, and we did. We did sell. And on that block, we made, this is with my partner, we made £100,000, give or take a couple of grand. It was £100,000. The timeline on that from when we purchased it to when we sold the last one and completed on it was around 7 months. It's pretty quick.
Yeah.
So, that, I wanted to sell that. I was doing some big renovation projects on my own home, on my residential home. So I wanted to create the cash in order to pay for those. Had that not worked out, then I would have been able to recycle my money, keep those properties, and they would be chugging along to this day, like the rest of my kind of buy-to-let portfolio, hopefully kicking out £350 a month profit on each of the individual properties.
Nice. I think there's clearly lots of different approaches in terms of selling. Some people will want to, right at the start of their journey, they'll want to buy in order to be selling to increase their pot, and then they start to look at retaining. Some people will go down the retaining route. Some people will go a bit of a hybrid where they maybe every 2 they might then say, okay, I'll do 2 that I'll retain, and then 1 that I'll actually sell. And I guess it depends massively on kind of the areas you're buying, how much you need, what your kind of seed money initially, because at the start most of us are giving money to our business. By seed money I mean that we're taking from our day jobs and we're shoving that into a property business. It's not self-sustaining right at the start. Interesting. So for me, I'd be doing something somewhat similar, just probably largely around your kind of 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom terrace houses type thing. Again, rundown properties and going down that buy, refurbish, refinance route. I think it's something that they have. And I would be retaining. I would be retaining right at the start. I view as part of my kind of business life cycle that at the start it's all about retention and getting to a point of solid cash flow where I've past the points of financial freedom, and I'm actually at a point now where the business would be able to generate a good chunk of money each month, each year, and then it allows you then a buffer to then go off and do things that aren't cash flow generating in terms of a month to month. Perhaps that's looking at your developments or the flips. But for me, I wanted that security of having retention. So the actual strategy I'd be going down would be looking at these kind of 2-3 bed terrace houses that are grandma has lived there, and it's very clear that they've not been loved for a long time. Maybe the bathroom is pink, and the kitchen looks like something that's older than both of us put together, and it's that kind of property. And the real reason for that is in the same way that you've gone something that has worked for you. This has really worked for me, and it's the level at which this renovation is probably just it's probably just a medium renovation. I'm not adding in an extra floor at the top. I'm not adding in an extension. It's that medium renovation that with a decent team of builders, and because that's another thing. It's when you're starting out, it can be hard to have your builders there already ready to go. They might not, they're not going to prioritize you right at the start. It's not. I could phone my builders now, and because we do a lot more work together, it's likely that you're going to get likely going to get a better service when they know they're getting regular business with you. But when you're starting out, you don't want to bite off more than you can chew, I think. And whilst it's not just about strategies working or not, it's about a case of whether you, as an individual, myself, right at the start, can execute that well. That kind of light to medium-sized refurb on these, 2, 3 bedroom terrace houses that then go off and cash flow hopefully very well off the back end of that. So to give you context, I have been in the kind of property I'm talking about is in the Midlands where I invest in the East Mids and around Nottinghamshire. I'm talking about 120, 130,000 pound houses that I can go in and put in around about 10 to 15 grand into it, probably a bit more than 15 now. As time cracked on, end val on them might be around about 150, 160 kind of region off the back of if it's 120 to 15,000 into it to about 150, 160,000. That's the kind of property I'm talking about. It's not anything that is necessarily a showstopper. But I can find these very very regularly, and that's the other thing that your criteria needs to be firm and hard enough of a criteria that the deals really work, but it needs to be open enough that you can actually find these deals. There's no point saying that I want something that does X, Y, and Z, but if X, Y, and Z is never hitting the open market, then 10 years down the line you're in the same position. And I know that these kind of 120, 130,000 pound houses that I can put 15,000 into, I know that I can find those fairly regularly.
So in terms of that, you'd be probably, I'm just crunching some numbers as you talk. So when you'd be looking to refinance those, that might leave some money in, maybe 10, 15,000 pounds in that. And let's say that you were starting with this £100,000 pot that you talked about. So after X number of deals, 5 or 6 deals, you're probably going to run out of money, probably going to run out of that seed capital. So would you be looking at saying, well, actually, if I do 2 or 3 of these, for every third or fourth one that I do, if I can sell that and make a £30,000 profit on, then that's going to get me another 2 buy-to-lets if I'm leaving in, say, 10 or 15,000 pounds. So would that be an approach that you'd be looking at?
Absolutely. First and foremost, when we talk about kind of leaving money into it, we're talking about our initial capital that we've invested and leaving that into it. Now, if someone said to me that I can have a house that's worth 150, 160,000 pounds and I'm leaving 10, 15 grand into it, I would do that. I always say to them, if someone said to me, now you can have this, you just got to give me £15,000. Yep, here, take it. So first and foremost, I'm not annoyed when I have left that money in there. I'm not here, give myself lashings if I don't get all my money out like that. It's fine. It's fine. Over a long time period, it'll be fine. But yes, you're absolutely right. If you can go down an approach then of selling every few, or perhaps you use it just as a case to get yourself started and get that base. When you start becoming a landlord, you get different rates. You get different rates on day one when you get your first property to different rates once you've had a property for 6, 12 months. So do you get a few and then start moving on to other strategies once you've got back in? If you've got 2 properties that are doing, combined £800-900 a month in profit for you, you can then afford to start looking at other strategies. So yes, potentially then you start looking at selling a few in order to then keep retaining others, but equally maybe you go down the route of looking at HMOs, or you look at service accommodations, or you look at developments. For me, right at the start, it's great. I think it's great to get 1 or 2 of these basic buy-to-lets that have a family in there or a young couple that are going to stay there in there for a while, and you've got the backing of that, and then you can go off and do some of the sexier stuff with that selling it or.
I think that's a natural progression for property investors as well, isn't it? That 2 things can happen. So normally people get good at one particular thing. Let's stick with this, buy, refurb, refinance, get good at that, growing confidence, growing experience. And then when different types of deals coming along or agents are contacting them, say, hey, I've got this property, what do you think? They've got a bit more experience and can say, well, actually, this doesn't fit that mold, but I know I can do something with this. I know that I can turn this into something else. And probably the investors that you and I interview and that we speak to in your property network are looking at each individual deal on its merits to say, what can I do with this thing? But that's down the line. Very few people are doing that when they start out because it's just massively overwhelming. You don't really, a little bit about every strategy, but you don't actually know enough or have enough confidence to execute those. So probably starting out, get good at one thing, do a few of those. That one thing can have different exits, as we've talked about. It might be that you retain it in the portfolio. It might be that you sell it to bring cash in. And then once you get good at that, I think there's this natural progression to say, well, actually, I could, maybe this property warrants an extension at the back or a loft conversion. You can kind of step up the deal chain without stepping too far out of your comfort zone. Or maybe a property comes along where you can adopt a more creative approach to undertaking the deal because you start to understand, I now understand what this vendor is looking to achieve. How can I structure this so it works for both of us? But I think it's unusual to start like that. Some people do. Some people start at the gate. Some people are straight into commercial to residential conversions from day one, and that's absolutely fine. But I think we probably, if we're starting out, we have to have a comfort zone that we're in,
I think
and
so.
that's going to get stretched anyway. You're going to be pushed out your comfort zone.
I think so for sure. I think that sometimes in the kind of wider property world, on the online sphere, there's a lot of talk about, oh, well, if you should be doing this, you should be doing this, and it can be quite, they can be quite high profit, but they can be quite complex things. And I wonder if the people who are teaching those, and there's often a price tag associated with it, I wonder if the people who are teaching those are have got a little bit lost in terms of they're a little bit further along their journey, a hell of a lot further along their journey, and they've maybe forgotten what it's like to be at the start. And that I maybe sit there and say that beginners should start very, very low down in the complexity scale, and maybe that's not the right answer. Maybe there's a big space here, but I definitely think people should be starting here on the kind of complexity scale. For me, I think that it's very scary. It's very, and maybe this is the case of I've been investing for now what 8-9 years, and I'm closer to that start than a lot of people perhaps. I don't know, but I remember what it was like to send that first amount of money out and to be looking at a property for the first time, and it was scary. And it was scary. Am I making the right decision? Oh, and I wasn't in a position where I had my own property at the time. For me, I was still in rented accommodation. But if you're looking at £40,000, well, you might be able to pay off a chunk of your mortgage if you've still got mortgage on your property. There's a lot of things you could be doing with that. I think it's incredibly scary. For me, I'm always a case of, okay, so what's the move that you're most likely to do? Because I don't think people are most likely to go into these big commercial residential schemes first off. So what's actually going to get you out of this paralysis by analysis situation, and what can you do with a degree of confidence that you're not going to be making these wrong decisions? Because you can't, if you do your first property, your first investment, and it's the most stressful thing in the world, you don't enjoy it at all, you're not coming back for more. If it's quite a smooth, relatively smooth journey, again, you're right, you're going to get stretched in it. A relatively smooth journey, but you find some builders that have done your work. Okay, I can use them again, and you find an area that works and a process that works without it consuming your life, because most people here are going to have a 9 to 5 at the same time. Then I think you're coming back for more.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we all have different appetites for risk, and there'll be some people who are starting out in property who've got other businesses, more resources, more contacts, maybe more liquidity, more cash to bring into this, where actually just buying one individual property doesn't get them that far down the line. It doesn't get them that close to their goal. For those people, they've got more confidence. Maybe they're used to sort of managing other types of projects or other types of businesses. So their appetite for taking on a slightly bigger, slightly more complex deal or project is going to be higher. So if you've got another business at the moment that's making great money, maybe buying one buy to let isn't the smartest use of your time, because it doesn't get you very far along your end goal. Maybe your goal is, hey, I want to create 200 grand's worth of equity in a year, or I want to add £250,000 to my kind of net worth a year. Maybe those deals are more akin to like the small block of flats where you can tackle 4 properties in one go. You've got a bit more appetite for risk. You're a little bit more confident. You maybe know people in your local town or local area that can undertake the works. It's all horses for courses, isn't it? Where are you on the kind of risk profile? Where are you with resources? What is your end goal? What do you want to do? Let's forget about the long term goal. But what do I want to achieve within this 1 year time frame or this next 6 month time frame that is working towards that bigger goal? What's going to get
Hmm.
me there?
Hmm.
Yeah, I was doing a really
I
interesting interview the other day, actually, where for Your Property Network, where the guy I was interviewing, he wanted to create £1 million worth of equity within 5 years within a portfolio. And he ended up doing £200,000 of that from his first deal. Now, the deal that he did probably would be out of most of our comfort zones. It was pretty full on, but he was a quarter, a fifth of the way towards his 5-year goal within one project, which took 7 months. So it is horses for courses. And if you're watching or listening to this, you kind of got to take stock a little bit and say, well, where do I want to be? What is going to get me there relatively quickly, but within a comfort zone that I'm okay with? If you're a multi-millionaire now, you've got a really big business on the side, then probably doing one buy to let isn't going to make a lot of difference to your life and to your end goal. But if you're in a 9 to 5 at the moment, just starting out and saying, do you know what, a 25, £50,000 uplift, in equity created or cash, if I sell this property, that's going to make a real difference to me, then those are the things to hone in on.
I just want to. I'm conscious of time, and I don't want to let people get to their dinners and let people get to whatever else they need to do. But I just want to say one thing as well in property. We have to remember that we can sell properties. That if you buy a property and it serves a purpose at that time, you can exit in the future. We're not tied in. Granted, we don't want to go in with the. We don't want to go in with the this will last me 2 years and then I'll move out because you're paying a ton of stamp. But if you executed something, you execute it well, and you raise the value, you have equity sitting in there. Maybe you refinance that, maybe you don't refinance that, maybe you have a ton of equity sitting in there. And in the future, you're saying buy to lets were great at the start, and this sort of thing was great at the start. I didn't have my team, I didn't have the experience, and I damn well no, I didn't have the confidence, but I'm now at a position 3, 4, 5 years down the line where I can take on these big projects, and I want to move in. I want to move on to ground up development because I've built the team, I've built the process, I've built the money pot. You can sell. You're not wedded to this property at all. You can sell, and if it serves a purpose here, and you've raised you've raised your confidence level, you raised a bunch of equity in it, you can move on in the future. You're not wedded to these properties long term. But what you do need to do is make sure you buy quite well at the start, and that gives you the option to sell without having a bad equity position. What's interesting is both of our points and both of our strategies, it consistently come down to the same idea of refurbing to add value. Yeah, last week we gave away the tax ebook. Do we have anything that we can give away that is relevant to this? That's relevant to the adding value kind of strategy, which we're both clearly big fans of.
Yeah, sure. So, in fact, we're just creating it right now. So, we're creating by the time this goes live, it'll be available to download. We've created an ebook on the best ways to add value. So, how to get the best bang for your buck when you're adding value to property, which are the easiest routes to do it, which are the ones that you should probably avoid. Here's a spoiler alert on that. Basement conversions, probably steer clear. You can read in the ebook why. So we talked to one of the UK's leading experts on refurbishing property for profit, and that ebook will be there available to download on how to best add value, force appreciation of the asset. There are loads of case studies in there as well. And if you really want to take this to the next level, for your Property Network members, we have a full, I think it's 10 hours worth of training on how to buy, refurb, refinance. And that is everything from the initial analysis, crunching the numbers on the deal, how to force the appreciation of the asset. I think there's over 10 hours worth of training there, which is loaded onto the YPM membership site, and it's available to download for our members right now. So if you think that might be for you, you can hop onto yourpropertynetwork.co.uk or follow the links in the description here and take out a free trial to our membership. 28 days completely free of charge. Get your magazine, get instant access to the YPM membership site, and jump on that buy, refurb, refinance training.
Absolutely wicked. I think it's very consistently the best route for someone to get involved because it doesn't tie their money up, and it's not a coincidence that we often say it. So yeah, I think that's a great thing for people to jump on. Awesome, and I've enjoyed that. Yeah. Big smile on my face. So yeah, thank you very much for the session.
Thank you. Let's hope it's provided some clarity on what the next steps might be for you if you're either starting or, like your friend, kind of restarting in property. And we look forward to seeing you all on the next of these shows.